All right. Welcome to another TCB Live. Today we have Eric Anderton on with us. Eric, thanks so much for being on the show.
Casey, my pleasure. It's great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Since 2004, Eric has helped his construction clients increase profitability by building clear strategic plans, developing their best people, and executing their most important priorities. He is also the host of the Construction Genius podcast, which is actually, I just found out our episode went live today because we were on his podcast a little while ago, which is a weekly podcast, and he interviews people all over the world in the construction industry. So Eric, we had a really good interview and really good conversation. I can only hope that I'm half the interview you were. But let's talk a little bit about before 2004. Like, you've been doing this for a long time, obviously. But what were you doing before that time, before you started getting into the construction world?
Well, I have a degree in history. So when I graduated from college, I went directly into selling. Since degrees in history don't get you very far if you're not going to be a teacher. So I sold copy machines for a number of years, worked for a variety of good companies. And then one day I met a gentleman who was selling a leadership development program. That's a worldwide program. And he and I began to work together. And my first client in 2004 was a framing contractor, and they are still my client today. And that's when I began to really understand the world of construction, began to work with construction companies in a variety of different fields, both general and specialty contractors, and kind of fell in love with construction.
Yeah, construction, something I've been involved with since I could start working, really. But it's definitely not an easy world to navigate. You're in a little more of the commercial space, which is different than the residential, at least in terms of how maybe some of the operations work. But we'll get into some of those details. But leadership is the same, excuse me, no matter what.
Yep.
And so what is a leader to you?
I think a leader is someone who is first an example. Particularly in the way that they conduct themselves, because in the way that we work as human beings, we're always imitating those who are around us, and by extension, we're always being an example to those who are around us. So a leader has to be someone who is able to demonstrate the kind of work ethic, the kind of personal integrity that is necessary in order to build a successful business. That's first and foremost, they are an example.
Yeah, I love that. That's always a quote that I liked was, you don't have to lead by example. And what I realized in having a son, that's the perfect example of leading by example, because they do what I do, not what I say.
Absolutely.
Right. So how do you work with your companies? Like, how do you help leadership develop? Because I'm sure there's first like the leader of maybe potentially the owners reaching out to you, but then beyond that, like there's some of these companies are huge, I'm sure, that you work with. They're going to have all sorts of leaders within that corporation, right? So how would you start working with these teams to make that happen?
Yeah, I've done a lot of work over the years with construction companies with leadership development. And I've developed a very simple framework for leaders to understand in terms of how to lead their people and the messages they need to communicate on a consistent basis. So if you grab your ear is spelt E-A-R. And in that sort of cheesy kind of framework, there's three killer messages that you need to communicate. The first is encouragement, that's the E. The second one is accountability, that's the A. And the last one then is recognition, that's the R. And each leader needs to consistently communicate encouragement, accountability, and recognition. Encouragement is, the way I remember it is, you can do it. Accountability is, did you do it? And then recognition is, you did it. And great leaders are constantly communicating those messages to their people. And as a result of that, they're helping their people to perform at the highest possible level on a consistent basis.
Yeah, I love that. I'm making notes. I'm sure I'll be taking tons of notes during this interview. I'm going to make sure I remember that one. And when I think of that, though, I wonder, can anybody become a leader, or do you have to want to become a leader? Because I know a lot of people, especially in construction, you see somebody, they're good at their job, and then naturally you want them to progress into the next position. But as that position goes up, they have to start stepping into that leadership role.
Yeah, I think a lot of people struggle from making the shift from building projects to building people. And some people are willing to go through the hard work necessary to make that shift by doing things like encouragement, accountability, and recognition. Some people are not capable of doing it. They're just comfortable doing the technical specialty that they're very good at. And as the owner of a construction company, you have to be able to identify those people. And what you don't want to do is you don't want to just throw someone out because they don't want to be a leader. If they just want to be an operator, if they just want to do the work, then allow them to do that and continue the search for the folks who would rather work on building people as opposed to building projects.
Yeah, and building these people, I guess, are you helping bring, actually, let me back up. Do you first have to get the right people on the bus?
Now see, that's essential. I think a lot of the reason why construction companies struggle is because they allow people to be in their businesses who may be technically a fit, but they're not culturally a fit. And what I found is the best construction companies build upon a solid foundation of understanding their business purpose and the personality of the business or the values that drive their business. And leaders take time to articulate those two things. And then they use the purpose and the personality of the business to attract the right types of people to the company and then repel the wrong types of people from the company. And so that's a fundamental foundation in order to be able to overcome some of the obstacles that we have in terms of bringing people into the business that aren't a fit culturally, and as a result of that kind of undermining everything that you're trying to do as a business owner.
Yeah, that's great. That's one thing that we realized. I learned it the hard way, is that we had the wrong people on the bus. Like you said, they were great people individually are doing their tasks, but they weren't a fit for the company. And at the beginning, a lot of times too, young companies too, that we just didn't have that culture. We weren't even sure. I didn't set the clear vision, right? So it was hard to find the right people because I hadn't done it myself at that point yet. I've since done that. So is this something that you work with on as part of this strategy as well, right?
Yeah. See, I have a framework. I call it the triangle one-page plan. And I believe in simplicity. Construction is not simple. It is complex. It's difficult. Business is difficult. Life is difficult. And so therefore, if I can be as simple as possible in the planning and the vision part of my business, then I can use that simplicity to kind of get through some of the complexity. And so the triangle one-page plan that I use with my clients, it asks 4 questions. Why do we exist, which is our purpose? How do we behave, which is our personality? What's most important, how are we going to be successful, which is our plan? And then what's most important right now, which is our priority. So purpose, personality, plan, priority. Your job as the construction leader is to clearly articulate the answer to those 4 questions and then make sure that you're driving all of your decisions through the filter of the answer to those 4 questions.
And is this something like people you start with? Is this like the beginning step of how you would work with people?
In many cases, yes. I would say about 75% of my clients, yes. Sometimes my clients bring me in specifically to work with an individual in an executive coaching environment. But if I'm working with the executive leadership team, I like to begin with the fundamentals. Why do we exist? How do we behave? How are we going to be successful? What's most important right now?
Yeah, and those are big questions, right? Those can't be answered in a 1-hour meeting, I'm assuming, right?
No, they can't. But with the right facilitator, they can be answered in a day or 2 days at the most. And the reason why is because I believe that most people who are watching this right now or listening to the podcast, they already know the answers to those questions. They just need help articulating it and clarifying it. And then they need the discipline to make decisions based upon the answers to those questions.
Yeah, I think you said an important word there, is that's the discipline. Because one of the things that I've realized too about myself is that you could be very clear and you're heading in a direction, but then, a shiny object appears and you start heading this way. So how do you help people stay focused and disciplined to continue down this path? Because to create this strategic plan and to work with you and to make this all happen is one thing, but then to actually implement it is a whole other side of things. I'm assuming you're
Absolutely.
helping with that as well.
Yeah, and so one of the core aspects of a strategic plan is right client, right job type, right location. Construction companies get into trouble when they take on the wrong projects for the wrong clients in the wrong locations. And so once you've clearly identified those, the way that I help my clients is by holding them accountable for those commitments. So if they're going to say we're going to do this type of project with these types of clients in these areas, then if they don't do that, I'm more than willing to call them on that. Or if they have a question about whether they should take on a project, then I encourage them to answer that question using the filter of right client, right project, right location.
Now, is there ever a time that a company would go off for a reason to choose
Mm-hmm.
a company or to work on a job that maybe isn't the right job for them?
Absolutely. And so that's the neat thing is there's three aspects to that, three legs of that stool, so to speak. And so what I encourage my clients to do is at least two of the three should be in place. So if I'm working with a killer client and they're asking me to go to a new location to do a project that I'm familiar with, I might be willing to do that because I like my client. I know I can do the work. I can go to the new location and I'll figure it out. But two of the three, if possible, should be in there. I was working with one of my clients a number of years ago. They got a project in a different geography with a new client. They knew how to build it, but because of it was a new client in a different geography, they only had one of the three core elements of a good strategy. And as a result of that, they lost money on the project.
Hmm. Now, okay, this might be a good transition. So they lose money. So now let's talk about profit and money as a company, which obviously is a big thing, as well as cash flow.
Yep.
And I don't know how often it comes up in commercial. I know that a lot of it could come down to bid price, right? How much you're putting in for the bid and crossing your T's and dotting your I's. It's a little bit different in the residential world. Yes, you can still get underbid. However, you're dealing with the homeowner, is a little bit more emotional, right? You're working on their home. It's a little bit different, but at least what I've realized in my world is that, and it's people underbid because they don't understand the numbers. They think they're going to make a lot. It's happened. Actually, there's a really big one like last year, and the guy wasn't as experienced, and he came in like $200,000 less on a project. 20 years, $1 million. I'm like, good luck. I know that project's not going to go well. How do you kind of get that out to understand like profit is you need to understand your numbers? How do you work with companies on that? Or have a lot of that sorted out already by the time they come to you?
They usually have that down by the time that they come to me. Where I help them is to understand what drives up their revenue and what drives down their costs, because the gap between your revenue and your costs is your profit level. And if you can understand what drives up your revenue and how you can improve those things, and then understand what drives down your cost and how you can improve those things, that then helps your profitability.
And now when people start to see this, do they say, oh, well, maybe I could lower my price because, well, I guess if you're driving up revenue, I don't know if that's raising the price or
not necessarily
how you present it or.
Yeah, no. So driving up revenue, it can be through value engineering. It can be through bid accuracy. It can be through bid strategy. It can even be through change order management. So one way you can drive up revenue is, capturing every dollar that you earn. Many folks, they do extra work for people. And I know in the residential area, this can be one area of frustration. You go into somebody's house, you're working on, let's say, remodeling a bathroom, and then they say, hey, can you change the door on this particular, on this bedroom as well? And you want to be a nice guy or gal, and you say, oh, sure, I'll do it. But that costs you time, right? And they just kind of sort of put it in underneath, and you're doing extra work and you're not necessarily get paid. So you need to be disciplined in order to manage those changes, and that can really drive up your revenue there as well.
Yeah, well, and then where it gets tricky is managing the people, because I'm not on the site all the time, right? So if my guy says, yeah, I'll do it. Yes, you want him to take care of the client, but if the communication isn't there between our team on site and the office, well, then there's going to be missed opportunities, right? Or they maybe didn't know that it was going to be more money or whatever. We've run into all sorts of issues. So we've been working on that for years now. I think we have a pretty good system, but like anything, there's always room for improvement, right? So
I think, and this is one of the keys, is that your people, if you're not on site all the time and you're in a residential situation, your people need to understand what is a change, or what is a change and what is not. And then they need to understand that it's okay to say no to the owner right there, or I don't know, let me check with my manager or my boss and I'll get back to you. They don't necessarily have to jump on everything right away. It's okay to say no, or I don't know.
Yeah. So yeah, which comes down to, yeah, there's a whole other thing, right? Like you said, it's complex. It's not easy. It's you have to have the right people in the right positions that are able to say no, for example, that can handle the homeowner, whatever it may be, and can tell them the truth, right? Like sometimes you have to just tell them the truth, even though they might not want to hear it, right? So,
yes.
Um,
and let me just say this: the worst thing that you can do. See, what happens is that, let's say I'm the builder, you're the homeowner. I say yes to you, but it's like a grudging yes, or one where you're thinking, man, I'm getting hosed by this guy right now. And then another situation comes up a little further down the project. And instead of reacting in a way that you should, perhaps you overreact and you say, no way, I'm tired of working with you. And you have this negative relationship with the homeowner. And it's so important that right from the start, you clearly articulate to the homeowner what you're going to do and what you're not going to do. And if we get outside of the scope of what we're going to do, then there's going to be a change. It's going to cost time and money, and therefore we're going to have a conversation about it. So we remain on the same page all the way through the project, and levels of tension don't get ratcheted up unnecessarily.
Yeah. I think that comes down to communication too, right? Mm-hmm. Is this something else that you would work on with maybe part of the strategy? Like there's communication with the clients, but there's also internal communication.
100%. 100%. And particularly in commercial construction, the tendency to have silos is so profound. You know, you've got the field versus the office. You've got the people who are going out and selling the work, and the people who are saying, okay, that's really great that you sold the project. Now I got to build it. And there's going to be a big gap between what you sold and what I can build. And so silos are very natural within construction companies. And so what that means is the leadership team that consists of the leaders of each one of those natural silos needs to be very strong and very consistent in their inter-silo communication, with the view of breaking down the walls that naturally occur so that the mishaps and the miscommunications and the tensions are reduced as much as possible.
And what would be some of the things that you would recommend, or that these companies do to make that happen?
Well, the first thing you need to do is, and I know this is probably something that people hate to hear, is that you need to have regular meetings.
and what's a regular meeting? Is that?
Well, I would say that with the leadership team as a whole, you need to have at least a monthly meeting of 2 to 3 hours of the whole team, the whole core team. And I think of a construction company, I've got to bid the work, I've got to build the work, and I've got to get paid for the work. So those three aspects, I want all those folks in a meeting at least once a month, where we're talking about what's worked this month, what hasn't worked, what do we need to do to be more effective moving forward, what are the jobs that we're building where we're struggling, which ones are we succeeding in. There needs to be that communication. And really what people need is they need training in how to have difficult conversations, how to really be able to sit down and go through the pain of conflict, which is inevitable, particularly in construction.
Yeah. What would be some tips or advice that you would have on that? Like, how do you deal with that? Because that can go on either side, right? You could be dealing with a manager that's not working well, or it could be with the client. It could be, once again, internal or external.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, you have to be able to tackle your toughest challenge head on. So when you wake up in the morning and you think about, what do I have to do today? Perhaps one of the things that's going to pop into your mind is a difficult conversation. And the tendency will be to put off that conversation, perhaps thinking it'll fix itself, or maybe it should be somebody else's job. But if you're the one who should be having that conversation, I encourage you, do whatever you can first thing in the morning to tackle your toughest challenge head on, and don't allow it to continue to linger. Because I have this little framework I use with my clients. It's a pain and time framework. The more time that goes past, the more your pain will increase. So if you allow time to pass, the pain will increase. If you want less pain, then deal with the issues as quickly as possible.
Yeah, I tend to agree with that. One of the things that I've realized is that these difficult conversations that have to be had are never as difficult as I think they were going to be, right? Our mind always thinks that it's going to be way worse. And when you do it, you come out of it, you're like, oh, well, that wasn't so bad. Like should have did that like 2 months ago when when it came up, right? Hopefully it's not that long, but that's definitely been my experience.
And I think what you have to be able to do is prepare for the conversation beforehand. A lot of times what happens is that we get into these confrontations with people. We haven't taken time to prepare for the discussion. And then as a result of that, we have ineffective conversations. And so what I encourage my clients to do is to take time to really think through what the issue is that they're looking to address, and then select a specific example of the issue. The worst that you can do is you can go into someone and say, you're always doing this, or you're never doing that. If someone comes to me and says that, I'm like, well, what are you talking about? But if they come with a specific example and say, when on Thursday, when you were talking to this client and you spoke to them in this particular way, this is the impact it had on the client. And if you bring me to Thursday with the client and the specific example, that can then help me to understand where perhaps I need to change and what I need to do differently.
Yeah. And one of the things too, we talk a lot about bringing up stuff for other people, but I think what's really powerful is even just doing that check-in on ourselves every day would be great. But, thinking back and taking some time to reflect on your own day and saying, what went well, what didn't go well. Did I like the way I acted or reacted, or did I react in a way that I shouldn't have? And then you can actually probably put out some fires that could have all of a sudden be created, right? Maybe I got upset at somebody, and if I didn't address the way I reacted, then this could be turned into something much bigger down the road. Whereas if I go back and be like, hey, remember when I did this? Sorry, shouldn't have did that. That'll actually become a lot easier to deal with.
Yeah, and I think you really hit on a key point there. We have to appreciate as leaders the profound impact that we have on those whom we lead, and the fact that they can pick up on one phrase or one sentence that we utter, and that can be the defining narrative for them in their mind in terms of their relationship with us. And that's why we have to be careful in the way that we communicate. And just like you said really well there, Casey, if we come to the end of the day and we reflect upon it and say, you know what, man, I shouldn't have showed up like that. The way I talked there was kind of unacceptable. You gain credibility as a leader. You gain authority as a leader. You engender confidence in others when you're willing to come to them and just humble yourself and say, hey, you know what? The way I behaved yesterday, that was unacceptable. I shouldn't have talked to you like that, and I apologize.
Yeah. And, easier said than done for sure.
Yes. Yep.
But it takes practice like anything.
Yep.
Now, a big part of a business, obviously, sales, marketing.
Yes.
It's not going to, business isn't going to come, by itself. You have to go out and you have to actively market, whether it's yourself. And I think this is everything. You're in sales, you were in sales before, but you went to school for history. I guess you're still in sales to some extent.
Yeah, I'm still in sales.
So, we all are, right? We're selling ourselves every single day.
You bet.
Sales, being a salesperson is not like something you mentioned before we hit record, that I grew up to do, but nobody raises their kids to be a salesperson. But one of my mindset is like, I actually told my wife, I'm like, I'm going to turn our son into the greatest salesperson ever, because that's everything.
Yep.
Right? To some extent, obviously you have to follow through on what you're selling, that's a whole other side of it. But let's get into that. How do you work with your companies on the sales side and marketing? I know they're different, but they to some extent come hand in hand, because marketing is I guess to some extent telling people what you can do. Sales is kind of almost a proof of doing that, but you have to follow through with that.
Yeah. So I work with my clients in a number of different ways, both from the sort of the psychology of selling, and then also the strategy of selling. So from the psychology point of view, one of the fundamental things that you have to understand is that people buy from people that they know, trust, and like. And so what you have to do is you have to build that that relationship with people before they will buy from you. Okay, so there's simple ways that you can do that. One of the things that I've done over my career in sales, and one of the things I encourage my clients to do, is to keep showing up, to literally keep showing up. And in our age where there's, obviously all these digital ways of communicating, here we are over Zoom in different parts of North America. One of the most powerful things you can do is really get your face in the place. And I understand that with COVID, it's a little tough, but whenever you can get face to face with someone and get to know them, it's a real good way for them to build that trust with you. And then you have to really be able to just drop your ego and think about, what are the problems that I can solve for this person, and how can I add value? Because in order to be successful in sales, you must solve problems and you must add value. And then the third thing I would encourage you to do in terms of know, trust, and like is just to be persistent. And that goes back to the keep showing up. Not only get your face in the place, but make a long-term commitment to what you're doing. Because people like to play long-term games with long-term people. And so be that type of person, whatever it is that you're selling or whatever industry of construction you're in, whatever part of construction, and it will really help you to be successful from the psychology side of selling.
Yeah, let's talk a little bit about the psychology side. Like you mentioned, solving problems. That's really why any business exists, is because you have to solve a problem. But then what happens is that all sorts of problems come up, right? I talk to my team a lot about this, and there's, especially in renovations, all we do is uncover problems, right? So every single problem that comes up, I'm like, that's why people hire us, so that we can solve those problems. So what are some ways to kind of navigate the psychology of having to consistently deal with problem after problem after problem? To some extent, when you get really good at it, you're solving it without even realizing it. But sometimes you have to get beyond that first step, right? Beyond this is just another problem. And then you start kind of going into the negative spin of all the negative things that could happen from this problem, or did happen, or who knows what, right? Whatever the brain is doing to us at that point. So how do you maintain that control?
I think the first thing is, and let me speak to residential here specifically, and I know it applies to commercial, but you have to tell your clients the truth. So let me give you an example. My wife and I did a remodel just recently of our bathrooms and some other stuff. And we purchased 2 shower doors that I contracted with someone to install for us. And when the gentleman came out, I already had purchased the shower doors. They were already in my garage, ready to be installed. And he looked at one of them and he said, "You know what, man, this is the wrong shower door. You should not install this shower door. It's not going to be a fit for what you're going to try and do. And it's not in your best interest." And you know what that did right away? First, it kind of pissed me off because I had the wrong shower door, right? So I was thinking, man, now I got to go get another shower door. But my immediate next thought was, this guy is not BSing me. He's not just going to throw something in there and hope for the best. He is going to do his very best to provide me with service and with a high quality installation. And so I went out, I got the new shower door. He came in, he did a killer job. And then this week, I have a vanity that needs to be installed downstairs. And I just text the guy right away. I say, "Dude, can you come out and install this vanity?" And I don't even care what the price is at that point, because I know this guy, I trust him, I like him, I know he's going to do a good job, because he was honest with me up front when we first began starting our relationship.
Yeah, no, I love that. I often tell people that I'm like the bearer of bad news a lot of times, right? Because they'll come to me with stuff, and I have to tell them the reality of what it is, at least what I know. And I'm sure we've lost jobs because of what I've said, but I'm sure we've gained a lot more because of what I said as well. Because when I tell people that they can't do it for the price that they're hoping to do, and these are the reasons why, and they go with somebody else, that's fine. Most of the time I won't hear if the job went well or not. But we're dealing with repairs all the time when people realize they did the renovation for the first time, they went with the low bidder, and then now they're reaching out and they're like, "Yeah, this isn't our first renovation. We went with the low bidder on the first time, and we're not doing that anymore."
And it's interesting because what I think is really powerful is that I've already referred this guy to other people, friends of mine. And the reason I referred him is because he delivered on his promises and he's a good guy. And so in terms of building your business over time, particularly, I know it applies in commercial, but I know in residential, because it's such an emotional, personal thing, If you can come in and solve my problems quickly and I don't have to worry about it, if I've got to pay you a few extra $100, I mean, I know as far as I'm concerned, I don't care about that extra $200 because that gets it off of my plate. I know how much my time is worth. And if you can deliver solutions to my problems, even at a slightly higher rate, but I can trust on you for your reliability and your integrity, then I'm going to do that every single time.
Yeah, for sure. And I always tell people, my wife and I, when we got married, we hired a wedding planner, and I looked at the wedding planner as like a general contractor for weddings, right? I'm like, they've done this a million times. They know what they're doing. I don't plan on having another wedding. I don't need to know how to plan a wedding. I don't need to deal with any of that stuff. I'm going to pay somebody to deal with it so that I can focus on what I want to do that day. And it ended up being like the greatest day of our life. Our family wasn't stressed. We weren't stressed. I'm sure there was stuff that happened. Yes, there was still a lot of decisions that need to be made, just like in construction. I can't expect the wedding planner to make all those decisions, but when it came down to implementing everything, it was done. And it was perfect.
100%. Yep.
That's what I look at it too. So when you say add value, what do you mean by add value though? Would be add value mean just getting it done quickly? Or what are some ways that we can add value?
Well, I think one of the fundamental ways to add value is to really know your trade, because, and I know this is true in commercial. Let's say you come to me with plans for a particular project, and I can take a look at your plans and I can do some value engineering where I can suggest new ways of installing something or new products that you could use that could actually save you money. That's a particular way that I can add value by saving you money. Another way that I can add value if I'm a general contractor is in the way that I coordinate the subs that are working for me. And the way that I do that, focusing in on safety and productivity and quality, that's another way that I add value. And as a general contractor, I add value by being a resource for my client so that I'm the one choosing those subs that they're working with, and knowing that I'm picking the right people to work on that particular project. That's another way of adding value. So there's multiple ways to do that all throughout the project.
Yeah, and I'm sure it depends. It's going to be different from person to person, right? What you just figure out what their needs are, and then if you can address those needs, that's a way to add value one way or another.
Well, I'll give you another example. When we were doing this remodel, the guy who was doing the bathroom remodels, he's in our master bathroom, and he figures out that there's this little attic space behind our bathroom that we kind of knew about, but not really, And he said, "Hey, listen, I can put a door right in here. I can create a little sort of mini walk-in closet for you. And you can put a whole bunch of stuff in there, and it's a great use of your space." And that was a very practical way of adding value. Now, it cost us a little bit of money to do that, but it wasn't like a huge amount of money. He made some money doing it, and we now have a new space where we can put some of that extremely valuable junk that we have in our house.
Well, now you have more floor space.
Yeah, right.
All right. So now what about marketing? Marketing is interesting. There's so many ways to market these days. What are some ways that you're finding are working either really well for you or really well for your clients? Or even ways that maybe things have been marketed to you that you're like, hey, that was a great way to market.
Yeah. I do think that what you have to do is you have to understand the pain points of your client. And then you have to articulate those pain points in their words and communicate those words out through your marketing message. So one thing that you can do to be an effective marketer is actually to interview your clients and hear from them, record those interviews and hear the words that they use when they're describing the problems that they have and the solutions that you've provided to those problems, and then use those words in your marketing messages.
Yeah, that's really good. I can't say I've ever recorded that, so maybe I should start doing that.
So that earlier when I was talking about one of the challenges that people have is making the shift from building projects to building people. Mm-hmm. That phrase came from a senior executive in a construction company based on an interview that I did with him. So I talk about all the time the shift from building projects to building people, because that's something that people think about all the time.
Right. That makes a lot of sense. Mm-hmm. Now, another thing that you mentioned, this might've been before we hit record, you mentioned things that we can control and things that we can't control.
Yes.
So what do you mean by, what are things that are in our control and what are things that aren't in our control? Because I bet you there's a lot of us that think that we can control certain things and we can't.
Yeah. So the things that are out of your control are things like competitors, market conditions, customer budgets, the weather, regulations, customer demands, material and sub prices. All of those things are out of your control. The things that are in your control are things like your bid accuracy, your customer service, your bid strategy, your quality, your safety, your productivity. Those are things that are in your control. So you have to distinguish between what's in your control and what's not in your control, and focus on improving the things that you can control.
Yeah, I love that, because I put so much time in focusing on myself and my mindset, because ultimately that's like the only thing I can control
right.
at the end of the day, right? So is how I react or act in any given situation. So this has been great. I could probably go for another hour or so, but this has been a ton of information. I know you have some stuff that you want to share. You have courses, a few courses, I think. So what are some things that you think would be really beneficial to our listeners or viewers?
I do think that you can go to my website. I think one of the best ways to get to know me is actually to listen to my podcast. And earlier I talked about the purpose, the personality, the plan, and the priority. If you start at episode 77 of my podcast, and you can go to constructiongenius.net and find that, or go to Apple or Google, episodes 77, 79, 81, and 82, it breaks down that triangle one-page plan. And that will really give you some insights into how you can clarify those 4 essential things that can help you to be way more focused and way more successful as a construction leader. So I'd encourage you to go check out the podcast. Another thing you can do is just go to my website, ericanderton.com /CLD. C as in cat, L as in Larry, D as in dog, and just get a free download. It's the Construction Leaders Dashboard. It's the dashboard I use with all of my executive coaching clients, helping them to clarify key things that they need to focus on in order to be successful. It's just a couple of sheets, and you can use it to clarify what you need to do in order to improve your performance as a leader. And that's a free download right there.
Well, thank you so much for sharing that. I'm going to go check out those things as well.
Awesome.
And do you have any asks of our viewers and listeners?
I don't have I think the one ask is particularly to residential contractors. I would really encourage you guys, as you're working with your clients, just to be straight up with them. Tell them what you will do and what you won't do. And then when a change occurs, have the difficult conversation as soon as possible, so that people aren't expecting you to do things because you haven't mentioned that there is going to be a change. Make sure you have those difficult conversations as soon as possible, so that you maximize the enjoyment of your client's experience as they're working with you through a remodel or a new construction or whatever the case may be.
Well, Eric, thank you so much for all your wisdom. I know we didn't get into all the history side and all your background, but thanks for being on the show. I really appreciate it.
And my pleasure, Casey. Thank you for inviting me.